I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome everybody to Player Tools, Synergy, Teamwork, and Optimization. So this week this day, since we have multiple per week, we're going to talk about basically how working together is a way to not only be more effective at the game and be more likely to win encounters more easily, but also be more optimized in fun for everybody at the table, as opposed to optimizing your character purely for, say, one attribute that is in your character. And so it's focused on a player perspective, but it's got information that GMs can use as well. And I will use some examples of teamwork that I found in even NPC teams that I created, for example, as a GM, that made them more effective than they would have been as written in the adventure path if I had not adjusted and put in more teamwork among them.
So shall we start at the earliest of possible sessions, the session 0?
The session 0?
Yes, the session 0 and what players can do during session 0 to make for an effective team.
Well, honestly, what you do to make an effective team spans the gap in a way that's a little different than everything else. So session 0 is definitely when you should start talking about it if you can.
Yeah.
When it comes to teamwork, because that's when you have a lot of potential to change completely what character you're playing that you might not have later on. But when you're thinking about optimizing teamwork and efficient play, optimizers often like to look ahead to what their character will be able to do over the course of time.
Yeah.
And you can't do that always completely at session 0, but it all starts in session 0, like
well,
everything else.
Because session 0 is where you, or when you're planning your character and talking to other people about what they're doing, is when you set the seeds for your character's trajectory. So making sure that everybody's setting their seeds for their trajectories in a good place.
Yeah.
Makes it a lot easier to make it a team that collaborates well in the future. So, like, if you have, rather than having two people who are accidentally going for the same shtick, like if two people are going for the same general theme, they can talk about how they can work together so that they are doing that in a complementary fashion rather than having both of them trying to do
That's a good
the
point.
Same thing.
I think, actually, let's first motivate the fact that this is something that you should do and that it is, in fact, more accurate of a way to optimize for both the fun of your team, which is harder to quantify, and actually quantifiably it is better for effectiveness. Because someone might say, well, in session 0, maybe I don't need to talk to anyone else. I'll just make my own character, and my character is going to do tons and tons of damage.
Aw, thank you, Nitrace.
Oh,
Enjoy
thanks,
your
Nitrace.
convention.
Enjoy the con. So, let's say that you say, I don't need to talk to anybody. I'm just going to make a barbarian that does the most damage. Or like in Pathfinder 1st Edition, I'll just make a gunslinger that does 900 damage per round. Double-barreled everything. The GM hasn't seen the errata on those. And it's going to die, and it's against touch AC, so nothing can stop me. And I'm not going to consult with anybody else. It doesn't matter what else is in the party. It kind of does.
Yeah.
Even though that character who we've defined as just winning automatically on their first turn in Pathfinder 1st Edition, where things could get that extreme. If the entire rest of the party is characters who all are exactly your character, and they all automatically win on their first turn, then you will find that there's still some encounters in Pathfinder 1st Edition because of just the way that the PF1 math worked, that you're worse off at handling than certain other things if you had had a teamwork. So,
and let's say that the team. Let's change one of the other people on that team. One of the other people on that team is somebody who's really interested in being like a controller wizard, and so they want to have all these spells that do things over time that slow things down, and then if everybody's just running in and bashing, then they don't have time to do that.
And even if you don't care about the feelings of the other people,
you should care about the feelings of the other people at your table.
Which you should.
Yeah.
If one of those other players is a diviner, who can buff up your character in a variety of ways and always acts on the surprise round, and you all take lookout, the feat that lets one person act on the surprise round if anybody acts on the surprise round and you're standing next to each other, suddenly certain situations might go flip to a different way. For example, there is an encounter in a published AP where before you can possibly act, unless you have an ability to magically act on the surprise round, like a wall comes down that you can't possibly expect is going to come down, and you've made 6 saves during a surprise round, 6 will saves. And no matter how good your will save is, after 6 of them, there's a reasonable chance that you will fail. And those will saves are against a confusion effect that also is from a creature that can control your choice on confusion. It's going to attack your nearest allies. If you're in a group with 4 of those gunslingers that, even if they have very fast initiative, you better hope that the one who goes first is not one of the ones who failed one of their 6 confusion saves. Because on average, even if your gunslingers are also so optimized that they have plus 92 to will saves in this level 6 adventure, on average, about 1 to 2 of them will have failed their save. And then the one who failed their save will do 900 damage divided among your party members.
And then you're all dead.
And you're all dead.
Yes.
So, like... And that's a real... APs usually have pretty easy encounters, but that's a real encounter. It's the first encounter in an Adventure Path volume. That's just a very simple example of this diviner. Like, other than the fact that they have done the surprise round, they could be diviner... In this example, they could be a diviner 1, commoner 6 in that 7th level party, and they would be adding more than that 4th gunslinger if everyone took lookout, just on the grounds that they're getting everybody into every surprise round. And in PF1, surprise rounds were brutal, and generally the only way that a group such as the auto-win gunslingers would lose, because there were things that could kill you automatically on a surprise round, or very, very likely.
But I mean... You give it PF1 specific example,
sure.
but this
in
is
second
true.
edition. There's fewer cases where your character can just auto win everything, so you kind of need to use some kind of teamwork.
So, and when I was talking before about if your characters are going for the same shtick, making sure that that's synergistic. I mean, having 2 people in the party who are both really good at sneaking, having people in the party who are both very good at sneaking. And then they're gonna go in, and their shtick is gonna be that they're both rogues, and they're gonna sneak in and they're gonna stab the opponent. Like, that's one thing. But if you're like, we are both bards and we want to use these exact songs for our thing, then well, there's certain lanes that it's easier to have multiple people in who are doing the same thing.
In Pathfinder 2nd edition, there's enough really good songs that you can find one that you want. In 1st edition, you kind of better take one of the archetypes that trades out Inspire Courage if you're the second bard in a group, or one of you should, because Inspire Courage is, like, ridiculously, absurdly good, and it's going to be the one, hopefully your archetype gave you something very good in exchange for it, and it's going to be the one that the person who keeps Inspire Courage always wants to be playing. So, there's ways around it in almost any game. If you both want to be a bard, Session 0 lets you figure out how to do that.
So what I'm saying
have
is,
it work.
if players who have similar concepts can work together to make sure that their characters are built in a way that instead of competing to see who's gonna do that one thing, they're synergistic so that they can explore a broader variety of what that concept can do and really bring that forth in a strong way.
Absolutely.
And I did mention stealth there, because stealth gets into another thing about how it's similar to the teamwork feats. There are a fair number of tactics that work really well if everybody in the party is invested. And now you have ways around. Some people don't have it, like, follow the leader in 2nd edition, or certain spells in 1st edition to buff people up. but having everybody say like, oh yeah, you know, we're a party that's going to want to be able to be good at infiltration. So, you know, we're going to have people who are good at stealth, and we're going to have negate aroma extracts from the alchemist, and we're going to have like we're going to have invisibility, and we're going to have silence spells from the wizard and things like that. So if you have like a type of concept that you want to have your party be good at, having people work toward, hey, you know, how are we all going to work together to make sure that we can make this strategy happen?
That's right. A very good way to look at things that leads to groups, even in a game like Pathfinder First Edition, where a lot of the weird narrative things that Linda just named are coming off of spellcasters, whether they're the alchemist or it was clearly First Edition because it had extracts of a spell. But if your group looks at things as, here's a problem, how do we bypass it? Everyone works together to be like, oh yeah, wizard, you can prepare this, right? It feels like a group effort.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of people discuss online about like how, you know, the wizard, the fighter player is posting and they're frustrated because they feel like the wizard is doing everything except for fighting in Pathfinder First Edition. But on the other hand, if your group is thinking of it as a brainstorm and thinking of like the wizard spell slots as a group resource, that it's more like that the group got where they needed to go from teleport rather than a like me versus them.
Yeah.
However, that's part of just how your group looks at tackling problems.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to go back to looking at optimization, the Bard is actually a good example because when you're optimizing in any of the three games that we often talk about here, Pathfinder First Edition, Starfighter, Pathfinder Second Edition, a bonus is worth more than you think it is. Like, people said in Starfinder that the way that the system changed, it made a +1 bonus more valuable. Then they said in Pathfinder Second, correctly, that a +1 bonus is more valuable because of critical success. You could create an extra success and a critical success on your options. In Starfinder, it's really equally valuable to in Pathfinder First Edition. It's just that Pathfinder First Edition had a lot of like ridiculous bonuses that were just out there already.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of devalued them, even though their value was still the same, just because there was some weird other place you could get a +4 bonus.
Because a +1 doesn't feel so big when you can get a +4, even if a +1 would make a big difference.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to look at the sort of the math of helping other people and boosting things and see what the differences are so that we can understand just how important teamwork is in these games that we like to play. So here's a good example. Suppose that you are a fighter or a barbarian, and you are actually already next to the monster, and you don't have any special moves yet except for maybe sudden charge. Well, you don't need that because you're next to the monster.
Mm-hmm.
So your options that you're thinking about are swing, 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 or move into a flank with not a rogue, just like some other person who's there, and swing twice. In Pathfinder Second Edition, when you have 3 actions.
Mm-hmm.
So, does anyone have in the chat have like a gut feeling about when it would be better to swing, swing, swing versus move and swing twice with a we could say with a big old weapon, or even with an agile weapon for your swing twice? What do you guys think? So Stump Monkey says, I probably always move and swing twice. So, Stump Monkey, you are close to being correct. In fact, honestly, if you care about your teammates' chances of hitting, or depending on the monster, if it goes after you and then moves and your teammate doesn't actually get the flank.
Is it better
Steven
to move and
Glicker
swing?
refuses to fall into my math trap. Zapdos says the swing is only better when you have nothing better to do.
I think it's essentially better to move and swing twice.
Chiron,
unless maybe you're fighting in something with absurdly low AC like an ooze.
Chiron Valfor says when the enemy is debuffed and the ally's buff would be better to swing 3 times. So, the answer is, if the enemy is going to move out of the flank anyway, because and you're sure of it, and it's not going to help your ally, and you can hit on an 8 on the second attack. That means that you hit on a 3 on the first attack with a regular weapon, or a 4 with an agile weapon. Then it is slightly better to do swing, swing, swing. And if it's an ooze, actually, and you hit even better than a 3, and it's going even more off the map, then it could be better to swing, swing.
Well, I was assuming that. I see. So you're also assuming that they move out of the flank automatically, and your ally
if they move out of the flank and your ally doesn't get the benefit. If your ally could get the benefit, it's never better, and so therefore, Stomp Monkey got it correct right away. Because just even for helping yourself in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the reason why is because of the fact that basically at low accuracies, the +2 really, really affects your chances, and at high accuracies, let's talk about 4 and then 9 and then 14. At 4, 9, 14, that final attack is on the 14, hits on 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, and crits on a 20. That's an 8 expected value of 8 and 20. Basically, right? 7 hits, 1 crit out of those. But the +2 gives you 2 extra crits and 2 extra hits on each of your first 2 attacks. So therefore, it gives you exactly 8, and it's equal. That's why when you would hit on an 8 on the second attack, and nobody else benefits from your flank, it's better. So this is just one example of why teamwork is so important. It leads to another interesting question that it took a while for Starfinder players to sort of find out, which is, when is an envoy who sits around doing nothing except for get him and then that fainting maneuver better than adding the most powerful optimized Solarian or soldier you can possibly add to the group, to a group that already has some combatants? And the answer is, as long as you have 3 really good combatants, the envoy is way better than adding another one of such a good combatant. Just due to the fact that the envoy is basically, assuming those combatants attack twice, or 2 combatants who attack 3 times at higher levels, then the envoy is adding 1/5 of a hit from each of those people for each of the times that they try to attack. And so, yeah, it basically works out that the envoy is a major help, and once they get the thing where they shoot while they're doing one of the 2 of them, I can't remember now off the top of my head, then they're also adding whatever that it does when they shoot is just free gravy, and if you can get it to be a really heavy weapon with feats, then it's pretty good free gravy. And Joe Junger says there are also non-combat parts of the game where the envoy shines. Yes, absolutely.
Certainly.
I am very much simplifying support characters down into just flanking, or just theoretically just throwing off 2 buffs.
Yes.
But
there's a lot more that they can do.
There's way more you can do. But even if you just do the simplest things to help each other, you'll find that the math of any of the games is such that support characters are extremely effective at running up the numbers. The only reason that they're not as dominant of a strategy in Pathfinder 1st Edition is because you can also have a character who is built such that they immediately disable the enemy team unless the enemy team rolls a natural 20 twice, taking the lower, or that do so much damage that the fight is over and they don't need as much support.
And there's Zathos mentions moving so that casters can use AoE spells. Yep. So yeah, coordinating what your plan, talking amongst yourselves, coordinating what your plan is, so that you are. And another one that we'll often have for that is sort of deciding who's gonna rush in. Like, are we gonna wait for the wizard to fireball before we rush in? Or we're gonna wait and have the enemies try to approach us? So that the wizard zaps whatever's back there, and then the enemies may come up and approach us, and then we can fight them. Who are we going to have come in first? Are we, for example, going to kind of hang back and then have the person who has the shield come in. Where's the person who has the shield? Who are they going to protect on the map?
Mm-hmm. Joe says the +1 from their 2E Bard last week meant they didn't all get mauled by that bear. Yeah. When I was converting Cradle of Night, it has sort of like a follower NPC Bard who's a little lower level than the PCs, who basically just stays in the back and does support, which I converted to using Harmonize with Inspire Courage and Inspire Defense. That was very effective. She was definitely a help to the party by a pretty significant margin. Yeah, Stop Monkey says new guy's job is to get mauled. I think that was during our stream, and so I said, you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun the noobs.
Yep. So I mean, when I think about that, when I think about the like the where you put the guy with the shield, you know, you could also have you have multiple people with shield block. I mean, we had some things come up recently in War for the Crown where it's like two people are shield blocking for the same character, and that character who the enemy is trying to kill, and that character doesn't take any damage because shield block, glimpse of redemption.
Shield block, glimpse of redemption. Oh
yep.
Boy. It's pretty funny though.
It was pretty funny.
Zathos of Varisia compares it to tactical chess in a way, and if everybody's working together, you can really achieve some pretty fantastic goals. Like I've definitely seen a lot of people saying that that they think their spellcasters are not doing a lot, but I've also seen like people posting examples of high level play. Like I don't know if you guys have seen, but there's someone on the Paizo forums who's posted like a 20th level play test and a 17th level play test of their just playing themselves with their Iconics versus the high level characters, where they've got a Sioni and a Lem that are doing a lot. And our casters are so important to the amount of not just support, because I think everyone agrees that casters are really good at support and healing, but damage that can be done. That the fight in War for the Crown that actually was like more harrowing than ones that were higher level was one where the caster's ability to attack the enemies were sort of stopped with an automatic spell turning type effect. They could still support and heal, but they couldn't throw spirit blasts and disintegrates like they usually did.
Yeah.
And that really changed the offensive capacity of the party, because the Diviner really loves true target disintegrate, followed by everyone else piling on that person with their hits.
We sound a little low to Kruger.
Okay.
Let's see.
Are we low to anybody else?
I'll turn up the mic a little.
Testing.
Testing, is that better?
Let's see. It looks like Andrew W. in Discord, but not actually the Twitch chat, has said that was him doing the level 20 tests.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, his level 20 tests are some of the things that I've seen online that seem very similar to the kinds of situations that happen in the high-level War for the Crown game that I'm running, where it's like, yeah, the spellcaster did this ridiculous thing. Alright, everyone else says they're fine.
I turned it up just a little bit, but then Numbat said that she has the volume cranked, so...
Oh man, Synesthesia plus guidance from an Aberrant Sorcerer followed by Channel Smite from a War Priest crit.
Nice.
That is really awesome. Synesthesia is a very good spell. For sure. That one round of having Clumsy 3 is a great time to pile on the enemy, even if they make their save. Alright. So, So getting up numbers by debuffing the enemies or buffing your allies is one way that in pretty much any D20 style game, it's very, very effective, and certainly in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, where it can also create critical hits for you, it's particularly effective. But that's not the end of synergy, teamwork, and optimization. In fact, that's just one of the most basic ways to do so, but it's sometimes, like, I feel like we spent the right amount of time talking about it because it's not obvious to everyone. I read a lot of theory of optimization posts online, and it takes a while for people to get to the point where they're calculating in the value of support rather than focusing on, say, direct damage per round that each person gives, or did your spell instantly take someone out of the fight, or something like that.
Or the value of, the value of healing magic and condition removal to keep people going.
Well, I feel like those are super critical, but especially condition removal, but healing too. Healing has an interesting history that as I said, I follow theory of optimization conversations online. And the way that it kind of went, especially Pathfinder First Edition, was that because of the fact that like the core 4 roles include a healer and MMOs have a healer, there was a lot of pressure in some groups in every edition of the game. There was like, we have to bring a healer, you have to play the cleric. But because of the fact that Pathfinder First Edition, 3.0, 3.5 were sort of like, you could just make characters that automatically won the fight, you didn't really need to bring a healer necessarily if your group strategy was to automatically win the fight.
But I mean, I would say that though that healing still in many groups.
In our group, it was important because we wanted a challenge, so the GMs always upped the ante so that we didn't automatically win the fight by having enemies also build characters like that. But the reason why you'll see online, but the reason why I'm tracing it, so don't pause me just yet, is because of the fact that because of this, there were people who correctly knew that they could create a group where they would just win by a blitzkrieg, who were being still told, no, we have to have a healer, someone has to play a healer, and they got very angry. And they posted online, and they got to a position of just getting very, very bitter about healing and posting anti-healing screeds online, not because they're trying to be nasty, but because they've been being kind of pushed and bullied to be the healer. No, I know we don't need the healer in First Edition. And so it created like an anti-healing movement. And now in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, where we're back to healing being very effective in combat, like, I ran the numbers and made sure it heals you a lot more than the Pathfinder 1st Edition healing spells did up until the spell heal. And it's very useful and effective and can help your team a lot. And you might need it, because the enemies can hit pretty hard and you probably can't auto-kill them. But there's still people who are saying it's useless because of the fact that the pendulum swung with the anti-healing movements. So also, when there's enough theory of optimization online, there's some people who just get their information by reading the theory and not by being the people who came up with the theory and knowing why it's there. And people who learned it that way and are just using the PF1 line. So we've reached a point now where the pendulum has swung back. Healing is very, very good to have. There are threads popping up saying, is a cleric mandatory in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? Or is some amount of healing mandatory to have in combat as well? But there are also still people saying it's useless. And it's really interesting, and it all happened because of that swing back and forth. Interactions that people had, and groups that didn't have this kind of session zero, didn't talk about the teamwork, and that just sort of went at odds with each other because of the way that they saw of building up a team were different.
I want to point out something that Steven Glicker said here. Just do what I do, remove PCs and watch the chaos. Bringing down even a single PC messes up the group's dynamic. This is definitely something that we see a lot in the War for the Crown group, where we have a group of 7 players, but oftentimes one or two people won't be there. And then we have those moments where we're like, oh crap, we don't have the person who does that today. It makes a really big difference in how we play and how we approach things when we have someone who doesn't. Well, when we don't have somebody who we're used to being like, oh yeah, the person who has the really great thievery isn't here today. Okay, I guess we're disintegrating this wall. Hopefully they don't notice.
Yeah, there's a lot of good healing. And Alex says he's worried that the cleric might be too good at healing, like some of those threads say. I feel like if you follow those threads through, though, you see a lot of people who make the sort of the correct other points about there's so much other healing in the system, and you can see it in Joe and Numbat mentioned it above. There's so many other ways to be really great at healing that you don't need the cleric. Like, it's nice to have, but it depends on what you want. like, even with the playtest Oracle, and obviously that's not the final version, our Life Oracle player, who's usually our Wizard player more for the crown, built a Life Oracle that could do so much burst healing compared to a Cleric that it was not even funny. Like, nobody is going to be able to heal as much in a single round or two as that Oracle was doing. And it caused me to pull together, like, all the fights in one location into one giant fight, pretty much. And they were also all focus firing this one swashbuckler. And the Life Oracle kept them up, and no other class would have kept them alive. But the Cleric also has much longer all-day endurance than that Life Oracle does. And Alex is making it clear that talking Pathfinder 2nd Edition versus Cleric, Oracle versus Cleric, I am too. I'm talking about the playtest for Advanced Player's Guide. So it depends on how much healing you need in combat, how many times you need healing in combat, and how much you need at the time that you need it. Because and that's really where it's at. Because, like, a champion can get a pretty big heal that comes with an AC buff, and that's every time that that's every time that they rest for 10 minutes and refocus. But that's not necessarily as much healing as you could get out of the heal spell. In fact, it is less. It's fewer actions, but it's less healing. So, whereas the Life Oracle can put out more in that one round than anybody else, even in the playtest.
And Karen Valfor's talking about Angelic
Sorcerer with their Halo. Yes, they do have more healing with the Halo, and they can, not only that, they can use lots of different slots when they need to. So even without the Halo, they theoretically do, but it just starts cannibalizing some of their other spells. And let me tell you, a Life Oracle with Angelic Halo, from multi-classing into Sorcerer, easy enough with Charisma being their high stat, can heal anything.
Hypothetically.
Because that is what that Life Oracle did. And oh my gosh. Yeah, and actually a Chirurgeon Alchemist, at the point where they get maximized on their healing elixirs, can heal massive amounts, and they can do it with distributed actions, so that it can be healed. Like, you got multiple people contributing the actions to their own heals potentially, which is a pro and a con. So there's actually a lot of different ways to heal, and healing is very helpful in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And honestly, in Pathfinder 1st, healing can be helpful depending on your group. If your group and we're talking about optimization here, so your group optimizes, but if your group plays with baseline adventures, you probably don't need it. It depends. You might, if your group plays with baseline adventures and your thing that you're really good at is all defenses, and sometimes something is like targeting touch AC or something like that. But usually you don't need it. If you're playing with a group where you optimize and the GM also optimizes the opposition, and you just go to town with these ridiculously epic battles like our group did in Pathfinder 1st, then you do need in combat healing. But you definitely don't need the Cure Light Wounds spell, because that is not good enough for in combat healing. You need all sorts of sort of optimized forms of Pathfinder 1st Edition in combat healing. Cougar says, I miss the time where people would make a character because of what they feel they want to play. Now it seems everyone wants to min-max their numbers and options and create a team that works perfectly together. We play to make a history, not to do math. So, one of the things that was a goal for me in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and one of the reasons why I'm so happy to see a lot of people just saying this without us saying it really, is just like, I wanted to help create a system where someone who likes to optimize like me, but also likes the story and wants to just be able to play different types of characters, can feel like I could do anything, and I could play any character, and it's gonna create, and I can do it with a weird, outlandish concept, like some of the ones you see on Reddit that people put out. It was like, I did this weird thing that's a weird, pretty suboptimal concept, but look, it's actually pretty strong. It might not be the best, but it's pretty strong. Wanted a system like that, where you don't get punished for going off the beaten trail in optimization. You just get to do your concept, you can contribute, and you can create a team that works well together. And you don't need a cleric, or you don't need a fighter. or you don't need any one particular thing.
And I'd say that, the topic of this episode is synergy, teamwork, and optimization. So, of course, today we're working from the presumption that this is something that you want to do, right, in this episode. But fundamentally, as long as you make sure that nobody feels like their role is being completely stepped on and they can't do what they want to do, and that the group is having fun, those are the main fundamentals.
Absolutely. There's some point where you don't have to keep optimizing, but some people like to as a puzzle, like we talked about in the optimization episode. And that, and this episode was specifically, we made it because one of the players, and I'm blanking on their name right now, in the optimization episode said, this is a good philosophical discussion about what optimization is and how optimizers think, but it didn't have that much optimization in it. Can we do one that's about optimizing and shows that it's not just your character, but it's the whole group?
I think that's a really good point. When we do an episode on a particular topic, it's not because we're saying, oh, and this is how you must do your game or whatever. It's because we want to give you guys tools for how to do things that are related to the topic of the episode, right? How to do teamwork and how to do synergy, teamwork, and optimization in this case.
Yep, Stump Monkey says it's not always creating a team that's perfect, but a team that doesn't step on each other's toes.
So I certainly don't want people to watch our episodes and think that, we are telling you this is how you must do your game.
Yes. Also, don't watch an episode, hopefully, and think that whatever that week's episode is the most important thing. When we talked about ambiance and, playing music in games, I almost never find the right music to play in games. Sometimes I do, and I play that music. But whatever this week's episode is, or I guess this day's, because we have multiple episodes in a week, whatever the episode is that we're doing, we're going to talk to you about passionately and explain it, but that doesn't mean that it's the only or most important thing in your game, or even that you have to use that tool. This is one of the possible player tools in your toolbox as a player. And for some groups, actually, maybe it's not the right thing to do.
For example, I mean, there can be a lot of, when you have the story about, a lot of eclectic characters come together, they never met each other before, and they're just gonna have to figure out a way to work things out. There's a lot of great stories that come from that.
Rico says their party is Barbarian, Bard, Ranger, Rogue, and Monk. It's notable how much worse that would have been in core Pathfinder 1st Edition. Rico said. But yet you can probably actually make really great teamwork with them in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So we tried to make it so it was an edition where it's more about thinking about teamwork and working together with your group, but even that combination would actually work together really, really well, as opposed to, you have to have a cleric for healing, and you have to have this role for that.
Yeah.
Rico says they wreck house. I would expect that, because the bard can give support, and all of those other different classes, if they're are good at different aspects of combat, and will be able to support and help each other. The monk can get around anywhere and could provide flanks for the rogue, probably. I don't know which style of ranger they are, but either one would help. In the barbarian, there are several types of barbarians that would help this group, from the dragon with their breath attack, or if it was giant and had a really huge amount of reach. There's a lot of things you can do there. Kruger's group is fighter, cleric, monk of Aurori, ranger, and bard. So that group seems like it would be awesome too. Almost any group can work for you. But you just have to. You don't have to have session 0. And in fact, Pathfinder says we should talk about org play when you're doing this, because we said session 0, figure out not to step on each other's toes. But what if you're in org play and you sit down to the table and you have someone like me who really, really would prefer not to play a pre-gen, if at all possible. Not because I think that the pre-gens are not strong enough. I don't care about that. I just want to play my own character when I'm doing a story, because then otherwise I feel like I can never bring my character to that story.
Yeah. So
what if you have that and we're all the least synergistic possible, because we can't rebuild the character.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, organized play in a public setting is the ultimate example of, you all met in a tavern / the Pathfinder Society. You didn't coordinate in advance, and you have your characters. So you're saying you have sort of like the least synergistic possible. You guys are, so people are all built toward the same things.
We are all literally the same. So let's say that our table is.
Okay, we're getting another ridiculous example now.
I'm not going to go too deep in the weeds. We're 6 Chirurgeon alchemists.
Yes.
That's all that we have.
Mm-hmm.
We really can heal a lot with elixirs.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't go secondary in bombing or anything like that. We've got lots of good support elixirs, but they're pretty much the same one, like the Dark Vision, that Eagle Eye one that gives you free chances to find secret doors.
Yes.
All the ones that are good, solid, backup support elixirs.
Yes.
And our healing elixirs heal for a lot.
Yes.
But we can't really do anything else.
So, are you saying that these characters are counting on every single one of them is counting on someone else to deal? Do they have at least some basic bomb?
Let's say they have them, but they didn't put up dexterity.
Okay.
Not a lot anyway. They have enough dex for their armor, so they have +3 at level 7 because they're wearing chain shirt, and they don't want to not have all the AC from their chain shirt colored leather.
Well, so first of all, in the meta of Pathfinder Society, there's often discussions if you have a group that is very, very there are a lot of people colliding in the same roles. Usually somebody at the table is going to have multiple characters they can bring, and then they'll bring a different character to get that they'll bring a different character to mix things up a little bit. But for this extreme example, we're assuming that everybody has the characters that are all moving toward that.
Yeah, and they're all really, really into
nobody wants to play
their only
pre-gen.
character.
Yeah,
they're really into that character. They don't want to play a pre-gen and lose the fact that they're playing this. They're all Leshy alchemists, and it's blooming catastrophe, and they need to play it with their Leshy alchemists.
Okay, so I would say things like say feint or flanking for each other and going into melee when you go into melee and attack, or taking turns being the ones who are attacking and healing. And the ones who are healing, putting up the buffs that you have that can assist each other so that you can help each other out. Because this group has a very deep reservoir of healing, so they're gonna stay up for a long time. Their fights are probably gonna take a while, but they're gonna stay up for a long time. I guess it depends on exactly which buffs they have, what type of strategy they'd be using. If they're very stealthy, they may be able to start things off from a long distance or position themselves.
Let's say they all have 16 dex.
Yes.
Which means their accuracy with bombs is, but maybe they can hit. But they also have 10 strength, and they're just not going to be able to go to melee without using a finesse weapon. Which they have. Some kind of sickle.
Yeah.
Sickles are the most deadly, according to Leshies, because they can be used to defeat plants.
Well, yeah, then they probably are going to be using those bombs, and it's going to take them a little longer to defeat things, but they have a lot of healing to back them up.
What if they run out of bombs, though, because, they miss with most of them?
But you said they have 16 decks.
Yeah.
Okay, so your examples. I knew you were getting into a ridiculous example, and
I don't think 16 decks is that ridiculous.
16 decks is not ridiculous. A party
at level 7.
A party where literally everyone is a support character is a little ridiculous, but sure. So then they're gonna have to eventually get into melee with those items, or they're going to have to look at things like, say, picking up the items from things that they defeated earlier. Let's say that they defeated a humanoid earlier, and they had a bow from that they could shoot, or somebody had a backup bow that they could shoot. But you're gonna say nobody had a backup bow, and none of the NPCs previously.
Somebody had that weird bow from Fall of Plaguestone. Maybe they're using that.
Okay.
I'm trying to be reasonable here. I gave one of them the bow from Fall of Plaguestone. Maybe they become the ranger of the team.
Yeah.
And everyone just loads up bombs on it.
Yeah. But I guess the thing is that you could. I don't honestly see the point of this extreme example here. That you really.
But I wanted to see what strategies and tactics that you would suggest in organized play.
In Mark's not so perfect world. One of the things that I would say is that organized play rewards creative solutions. So, and a lot for in you're not really going to find a scenario where every encounter requires you to combat it. There's often encounters that can be bypassed with stealth, encounters that can be bypassed with social skills, encounters that can be bypassed in other ways. I would say having some people use recall knowledge to learn the strengths and weaknesses of the opponents and see if you can find ways to exploit that is definitely going to be useful as well.
Here's my question, because I literally don't know.
Yes.
Because that's not one of the like the counters there were not ones that, as the design lead, you asked me to check in on. From your final check on Blooming Catastrophe, do you think that if they were together in that way, that a group of 6 Chirurgeon, Leshy, Alchemists would find a way to make it through that scenario, and they'd be able to defeat the encounters with creative solutions or beat the combat ones if necessary?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be...
I picked it at random. It might be one that is actually very good for that.
I think that they would... I can definitely see them using a particular solution on the final encounter. But, yeah. So, yeah, but I would say that... you know, maybe they may be getting into things where they're looking for, like, improvised weapons to be using or stuff like that. If you're in the situation where it's like, we literally have no ranged attacks except this one bow because everything is missed up until now, and I am a Mark Parody.
No, the others probably have crossbows or something.
Yeah. But the fact that they have a lot of healing should be able to keep them up.
Spit seeds, says Stop Monkey.
Yes. I'm assuming Mark's gonna be like, none of them has spit seeds, Linda, because every solution you come up with, they didn't actually have.
Well, that's fine. Spit seeds does less damage than the crossbow.
That's true.
Rico says the real question is, how did they all get Leshies, which require a bunch of achievement points?
Without having other characters they could
Without having characters they could swap to. They only GM'd.
Yes.
And or their other characters too high level for Blooming Catastrophe.
Mm-hmm. You know, people say kids ask a lot of, like, but what if this, but what if this, but why questions. But, you know, Mark, I think that you give me a lot of practice with that.
Well, Linda, I'm just saying, I don't think this one was that unreasonable, other than being all the same. Like, I didn't pick something that's that outlandish. I picked a Chirurgeon Alchemist.
I mean, do you have any other suggestions for that group other than looking for chances where they can flank?
I think those are good. I honestly wasn't sure what you were going to say, so I wanted to know. Looking for other tactics
that they can use other than combat. Dividing up the resources they use so they don't have, like, one person who's burning through everything in one combat. And instead they're slowly working on things. I'd say recognizing also that you can rest and recover your resources. You don't always have to do everything in one day.
Also, if they're all this same alchemist, I guess they could consider a kiting strategy, depending on the movement speeds of their enemies, where they try to run away because they know they're all
do they have one of the elixirs that increases their speed, and then they could use that to assist with their kiting strategy? It really depends. Because you presented a lot of what they don't have as opposed to what they do.
I said that they have, like, all the good buff elixirs.
Yeah, well, then they have an ability to increase their speed.
Yeah, they could have Cheetah's elixir, for example.
Yeah, so then they can
Yeah, they can kite. So that's the other thing that I was thinking of there is kiting. So when you're not in organized play, though, you can usually work together to...
Also, can I clarify, when you're in organized play, you're never going to get one of Mark's parody tables, okay? Like, that doesn't happen.
I have seen a table of organized play where every character was a Dwarven Ranger with a crossbow, and they were playing Bone Keep.
Yes, that's Hearthkeep. That's something that people voluntarily subject themselves
to. It is. Numbat says unless they plan it that way.
That's something that's planned. Yes, you're not going to accidentally find yourself in these situations. My goodness.
Oh boy.
I understand that you do this to get me to
I want to see
advice that would be useful.
Advice that would work no matter what, rather than like if I say that everybody was a bard and you're like, okay, well, use your bardic attack spells to kill them with your bardic cantrips.
Yes.
You'll eventually win. I was like, yeah, sure, but these Chirurgeons may have like less offensive capacity than the bardic cantrips. So, uh, when you actually can work together with your group, though, you can plan a little more teamwork than the worst possible matchup.
Yes.
And the point of today's episode is that basically a lot of online optimization just by necessity, because it's hard to mathematically do an analysis of a team and their teamwork and working together. So a lot of people pick one statistic. It's usually damage per round, and just look at that and say that's the only thing. So I want to talk about one more teamwork statistic that I was going to bring up, but I didn't find a good place to, so I'm going to bring it up here. We talked about healing. We talked about like giving bonuses or penalties to your enemies. I want to talk a little bit about go deeper from healing to AC, healing, saves, and survivability. So survivability abilities are something that even the optimization community is extremely bad at measuring in Pathfinder 1st Edition, because of the fact that they usually would win so quickly that survivability didn't actually matter. It's also very hard to measure because the game is created to be fun to play and where you usually win. Yeah. So you don't. You sometimes don't need to use the survivability things. It's one of the reasons why in the playtest we had that delightful situation where you're expected to all die against demons. It's because if you don't do a stress test that is intended to kill the party, you don't find out if the survivability options and
how properly are they going to help whenever things get challenging.
That's right. They're overtuned or undertuned. You just don't know, because the time when they shine the most is when there are problems in survivability, and the game, we hope there aren't a lot of problems in survivability all the time. So that's why, for instance, a lot of groups in Pathfinder 1st Edition were saying things, like that initial 1st Edition Crane Wing wasn't causing an issue in our games. Like, the Gunslinger just killed everything, and the Crane Wing, nobody got to the point where it mattered that the Crane Wing character could just deflect an attack automatically. But when you play it in a stress test, or when I played one in a stress test, because I was like, this is really cool, and a lot of people online said it's not unbalanced, and so I think maybe it is, but I'm not sure, and there's enough people who aren't sure that I want to get some data. Yeah. And so I played in stress tests where I tried to play him up in Pathfinder Society Adventures just to see if I could survive. And what would happen?
Into ridiculous things like you blocking a doorway with a like CR, like a really high level T-Rex skeleton, for example, and like it just couldn't do anything.
That was during a time when our adventure captain, like for a few adventures, and then I figured out that we couldn't do this. Thought that you could play up by 2 sub-tiers in a 1 to 7. Yeah. And so my level 2 character was fighting a T-Rex skeleton in a 6 to 7 adventure. And by fighting, I mean automatically won.
Yeah.
But
he was in a choke point. The T-Rex skeleton was attacking him.
It wasn't even a choke point. The T-Rex skeleton couldn't get out of the room that it was in. So nobody else came into the room. It was a choke point
for the purpose of the T-Rex skeleton. That it couldn't attack. So I just called the fight because I ran a couple rounds and I'm like, and I checked the numbers. It's like, there's no way that you cannot be hit.
It's mindless. It's mindless. It's
not going to use other tactics. Eventually, you win.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, like, there are a lot of things, like, people could immediately tell against a one-hit monster that it's going to win.
Describe how you defeat it, please.
But without doing a stress test, it was hard to see that, like, for instance, there was a fight I did with that character once against 4 Dretches, I believe, something like that, with a pretty low-level party that was fighting 4 Dretches, and they stinking clouded out, like, almost everybody else in the group. So I wound up having to fight the 4 Dretches alone, and they made 12 attacks per round, but they also were very unlikely to hit me without rolling, like, a natural 20. Maybe they needed a 19. And if I could deflect one of those, that suddenly turned that damage output down from, 1 to 2 hits per round to often 0 hits.
Yeah.
So, that's one survivability option. There are a lot. And the point is that don't underestimate survivability options, even though it's hard to measure them in a game that's designed for the players to win. Survivability options are very effective.
Damage reduction abilities like shields and glimpses of champions reactions in general,
Yeah. And especially the Liberator's Champion's Reaction, where it can reduce damage and then step you away, which can prevent a follow-up attack from targeting the same person.
Yes.
So movement in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, especially reaction movement.
I mean, movement's very important in first. In some ways, even more important in First Edition because of the difference between the full attack and the single attack and the full attack.
If you can break up a full attack in Pathfinder 1st Edition, the person whose full attack got broken up and has to make only a single attack, they're not going to do their fight-ending move that turn.
Yeah.
Their fight-ending move is their full attack.
Yes. We had a question here from Level 1 DM. Our party has an Elf Wizard multi-class to be able to cast low-level divine spells to help with healing. Any tips on how he should balance his role between Wizard Support and Cleric Healer? I would say it really depends upon both what that player enjoys and sort of what the fights are, right? I mean, if
Absolutely.
And what the support spells are and what the party needs most. Like, if the idea is that they multi-class to help with healing, then having like a little bit of healing in the background but focusing more on the support could be helpful. But if they multi-class to help with healing because the party was direly low on healing and they really need that help.
So, to give an example from War for the Crown, our party wizard had also picked up heal, like, pretty early on, and he almost never used it. But then, in that fight I mentioned where there was, like, a bunch of souped-up spell turning that would turn any offensive spell, and the enemy started focus firing down the cleric, the wizard just suddenly pulled out his maxed-out staff of healing that he had, specifically to give himself even more heals. He had put a pretty high-level spell slot into it, so it had a lot of charges. And he started spamming off heals from his staff of healing onto the cleric to keep the cleric up. The cleric used like a magic banner. The party had to move them out of range of being attacked, and then they just healed each other away for a while the fighters were like flying up in the air and attacking swords, and the rest of the party was handling the fight, and then they came back in.
Oh, the other party members are Barbarian, Rogue, and Alchemist Bomber, so he is the healing.
Yes.
Yes.
I remember Level 1 DM talking about that earlier on.
Yeah.
So, it really depends on what the group needs in a particular situation. So
it sounds like in this situation that, assuming that the Barbarian, Rogue, and Alchemist, like, some of them could have taken the battle medic type stuff to help out with in-combat healing as well.
Also, the Alchemist, even despite being a bomber, can still create elixirs of life. And, like, one or two, like, make, say, 3 batches. I don't know what level they are, but at higher levels, 3 batches is easy enough. That's 6. And then give everyone else, or 4 batches, 1 for each party member. Give everyone 2 elixirs of life for their own batch. Just hand it to them and be like, in case of emergency. So it depends on whether they need combat healing. Was one of the things that I was going to say too, and Joe Junger said it as well. So you can start out when it comes to tactics and when it comes to teamwork. What you're doing for teamwork has to be evolving based on the battlefield.
Yes. And I would say that when you gain new abilities, that it's a lot of fun to test out different strategies, I find. So, you have something your character can do, you haven't really tested that out that much before, and then pick a fight, maybe not like the final boss to try something completely different, but pick some fights and try out different ways of going about it. And see, like, okay, this time I'm gonna go more with a healing focus and see how that works with the group, see how much fun that is and things like that. It's nice to have, I find, in characters. I mean, my favorite types of characters are characters who can do a lot of different things depending on the situation. So I'd like to have a few different strategies in my back pocket for ways that my character can do things. So I guess with the multi-class, you would always have at least some healing ability.
That's right.
Automatically.
And not only that,
like getting like a wand of heal to support that idea
or
as well, or a staff, exactly.
Like the wizard did in our group. The important thing is, when it comes to teamwork, there's not one answer we can tell your wizard here for what to do, because it depends on what the team needs. And it's evolving on the battlefield. For instance, let's say that they are mostly a support wizard and for their wizard spells, and a cleric healer for their multi-class cleric.
Yes.
I could easily see a situation where, like, let's say they're level 13, for whatever reason, and then they've gotten up to like 7th level wizard spells, 5th level cleric spells. And so they start the fight with mass hasting everybody. If it looks like it's going to be a hard fight with the 7th level haste. They don't need to heal yet.
Yeah.
Hopefully, the fight didn't start with someone getting wrecked. And then as people are doing their awesome hasted attacks, the barbarian gets wrecked. Let's say. And then they're like, oh, okay, well, I can do a 2-action heal on the barbarian with my staff or my wand or myself. And that'll get back the barbarian a whole bunch of hit points. But then the dragon breathes on the party and everybody takes a bunch of damage. Then they can do a 3-action heal.
Yeah. Or let's say but that makes a difference too. If the thing that wrecked the barbarian also wrecked back, and now that thing's really low, then maybe they should do a damaging spell to take out that source of damage rather than heal. Or how in danger is the barbarian? Does the barbarian's player still have their hero point? Is the barbarian wounded from a past encounter, so allowing them to go down is more dangerous than it would be is more dangerous than it would have been if they hadn't gone down before.
And you don't have to go purely on the defensive. For instance, let's say you're like, that, I don't need to use all my 7th level spell, I don't have that many, this haste should be enough in the first round. Then you find out you were wrong. And when the barbarian gets wrecked. So you can heal the barbarian with a 2-action heal, and then throw a true target on the boss. Now, all those combat characters are suddenly going to be rolling twice and taking the higher. So currently level 1. Okay.
Barbarian goes down pretty much every fight.
They're at con 10 barbarian.
Rogue becomes a new front line and the team starts to crumble. They either win fast or slowly move to a TPK.
They're an ancient elf. That's why they... So they actually only have cantrips right now, so they probably can't heal with their cleric.
Yeah. It sounds like with this party that it might be useful to have some ability to summon to give that rogue a flank too.
Wait, hold on. Let me see what else. They've got the bomber because they just have stabilize at this point.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. The name of this person is level 1 DM. I should have figured out it was at level 1. So, like, I would say that at this stage, the wizard doesn't have like enough cleric stuff to be really, really getting into the cleric aspect of themselves just yet. Barbarian with con 10 can be rough. Can be pretty rough.
Yeah. Having some people, getting some if the alchemist preparing a little bit of healing so that to pull the pressure off. And maybe having a person or two with battle medic would certainly help that in terms of getting people back up and moving.
Alchemists use elixirs of life in between combats.
Yeah.
That's true. If the alchemist puts some elixirs on the barbarian or even the rogue to go up and feed to the barbarian, it might work. Although the rogue sounds like there's a lot of pressure on the rogue to perform when the barbarian goes down. Also. The alchemist might want to start using bottle lightning as their main bomb for when the barbarian goes down to make sure the rogue still has the enemies flat-footed. Joe asked if anyone has the medicine skill, which can be helpful, but battle medicine is either going to be level 2 or from a background. And
that's right. They're level 1, so they wouldn't have that yet. Yes, right.
At level 1, there's more limits to exactly what you can do, but it's also true that at level 1, like, the barbarian's damage is very high and can take out a lot of types of enemies.
That's a good point with the alchemists and being able to do the flat footing for the rogue when they don't have the flank.
Yep, and also Wizard King says, you told me nothing Twitch and you said nothing Discord. Wait a minute, Discord. I saw Leshibot was on there.
I got a notification from it.
Yes. So
maybe you don't have all of your notification settings up.
That's right. I don't know, but basically, in this group, it sounds like you really need to figure out how to get those enemies down quickly enough right now, because you don't necessarily have enough sustain at first level. Battle medicine, the wizard picking up more cleric abilities as they level up, and more will allow certain characters to start getting more and more in that direction. But the rogue could, for instance, once they become the only frontliner, if that happens in all the hard fights, they probably want nimble dodge for when things start focusing on them. Hopefully there's fewer enemies by that point, so nimble dodge being only on one attack becomes more valuable. Joe Junger says, whoever came up with the concept of the Pathfinder Society General Store based on your society affiliation, mad props.
I honestly don't remember which of us...
I don't know who came up with the concept, but the one who actually executed on figuring out what the correct things in the store was John.
Yeah. But yeah, this is definitely one of those things that it's hard to remember who came up with the concept, because it had been sort of a pervading sense of, you know, we've got these missions where we do have venture captains give people stuff in the beginning, and it's cool, but it would be good for the society to give more support overall. And also with working with consumables, we decided, like, maybe we can deduct a little bit down from the wealth, because we had to, figuring out the wealth for society was fairly complicated, and it is a higher wealth game overall. It's a Pathfinder Society than a typical second edition Pathfinder table, but the idea that you would have some amount of the wealth be in consumables that are just for that one adventure, and then you get back. We wanted that so that people would have an easy way to engage with the consumables of the game without feeling like they were necessarily committing to it, that they'd be able to customize some more. And because we know sometimes people are like, well, I would just want to spend all my money on the big things that are going to give me the permanent buffs, and I'm not going to spend money on these things. Or, like, you're with a group, and it's not being a persistent group. I know some people feel like, oh, I don't want to spend my big consumables on other players because they should be spending what they should be paying for their stuff.
Rico points out that the Owlbear Claw is a really good pickup for a consumable, because it gives their fighter with a flail an automatic trip on critical hits.
It's nice to have that for the things that you may not otherwise buy, and to give people a chance to try out different items as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am really happy with how that system turned out.
Yay! So, let's see. We've talked about the fact that the tactics and optimization go hand in hand with working together with your team, synergizing, and making sure everybody is able to do something that contributes without stepping on each other's toes. We've talked about the fact that adding bonuses and subtracting penalties is generally more effective of a strategy than just attacking all of the time, and that and the defense and healing are important unless you're in a situation where you can just blitz everything down. Are there any other tactics about the combination of synergy and teamwork and multiple characters into optimization that we haven't really discussed that are sort of a big thing?
Something I had a few minutes ago, and then I lost it. It may come back to me.
Okay. So let me see. I think we've covered a lot of them. I guess one thing that we may have felt that need to be said, but it should be said anyway, is if it's not obvious, the ability to make it so that the enemies can't act is incredibly powerful. Changing the action economy in your advantage is incredibly powerful. That's something I didn't mention because I wanted to talk about things that were usually undervalued by online analysis, just due to hyper-focusing on certain aspects of the game. But most people do know that changing the action economy is to your advantage, but therefore it could have made this episode incomplete without talking about it. So if you can increase your group's action economy or decrease the enemy's action economy, you can get a massive advantage. Even down to the automatic stunned one on certain spells on a successful saving throw against them is huge against like a big boss enemy, because they don't get their reactions, and then they also only get 2 actions on the next turn, which can screw up their routine and allow you to do other strategies, such as moving away at that point, where now their 2 actions really becomes moving in 1 action. You got it?
Skills. We haven't talked about skills at all.
Oh,
like having a
optimizing skills for your group.
Which generally involves, I mean, there's some skills like stealth where if you have multiple people with it, it's better when you have more people, or or you're using follow the leader or things like that. But it's nice to have coverage of at least most of the skills over the course of your entire party.
And in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, it's nice to have experts in as many of the skills as possible, because of the fact that adding that big fat 0 to your skill is very, very bad, and if you're forced to roll it, you're in big trouble. But if you have an expert to follow, then you're not going to add that. At high levels, you can add your level.
And Joe says best tip for skill coverage, have a rogue.
Having a rogue is nice.
Yes.
Because of the fact that they're going to be an expert in more different types of skills than anybody else is. The rogue multi-class is a great way to pick up more skills with their skill mastery.
And having a variety of sort of skill profiles across the group helps make it so that people can take turns being the one who shines.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, this person's good at these. And that's something that in 2nd edition, and in the 1st edition, but like I'm thinking about it more from the 2nd edition perspective here now, that it sort of evolves organically across the course of the game. You realize, oh, okay, this person's really great at this skill. They've got that covered. I can invest more in this skill. And even if you have multiple people who are good at the same skill, like maybe they can take different skill feats to cover different abilities for the party.
Yep. Like someone who's always the expert people are following taking Quiet Allies, and somebody else takes Foiled Senses. Joe's level 3 multi-class rogue covers all skills except nature and survival.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, that's pretty good. Just as long as you're not out in the woods. That
You're
character
fine.
doesn't like the woods.
Yep.
But if you're at home in your city, you know everything. Now, if you're a bard, you might also be able to cover all lore skills. Oh, he actually hates the woods. Well, I mean, being chased by a bear makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
If it's that character. If it's not, then wrong character. But yeah, you can actually cover training in a large percentage of skills if you have the character for it. Linda's Investigator and the Investigator playtest for APG had pretty much all the skills too. So, covering the skills and then getting an expert in them in case somebody in your group is untrained, because being untrained at higher levels is very, very, is very, very bad.
Especially for certain skills like some of the social skills and stealth, where you're likely to have a larger group of people needing to roll them, or like survival can be a good one to have that for sure.
Having an expert who's like, let me follow my lead about etiquette. If I'm tapping
society.
If I'm just in diplomacy even, like if I'm tapping my ear, that means that you've said something bad.
Yes.
Or some kind of follow the expert on that so that they get to add something.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you are very cognizant of that, since we had the other fighter in War for the Crown who tried to have as few charisma and intelligence-based skills as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh yeah. But yeah, skills was another important aspect to cover. Also, another thing that could be useful for your group, in 1st edition, maybe everybody's saves are so high you're not failing anything, but in 2nd edition, you're going to fail some saves, so having a group that actually divides out, and between you have some people who are good at each of the different types of saves.
So that if there's a big AoE that drops, you aren't all bad at will saves and all affected equally if there's a big...
Right.
Or will saves, or you're not all bad at reflex saves. So some people, so that you're not having the situations where either, oh, I don't care, or, oh gosh, we just got wrecked.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's generally more in the middle, which is easier for the party to healer to keep up with, or just easier for you to keep going until the end of the fight.
And if you make sure you're a specialist in certain types of saves, each one of them have some recovery stuff, whether that's items you gave to them or spells that they have. That way they can help the rest of the team recover from having failed that save if they're the one who didn't.
Yeah.
For instance, like, bards at high levels, one of the things people underrate on them in 2nd edition, or not even underrate, but just that they overlook because there are other really good things, because people do say bards are good online mostly, is they can get legendary in will, which means there are certain like mind control effects, like being dominated for all day, that just cannot happen to your bard once you're at a high enough level. It will never happen again. And so being unable to critically fail against certain will disables means that just there's you will always at worst be hit by the failure effect of them, and that's actually very handy.
Yeah.
And it also means that if you succeed, of course, a lot of people can have master and will, and then they don't take any effect on a success. It helps you not get hit by that stunned one, even though the bosses do. And that's an interesting effect in the game where all those evasions and stuff are rarely on the enemies, which means that you can still use your spells to get those successful save effects onto the enemies, the really, really important stunned ones on the big bosses, but the enemies can't do that to a lot of your PCs because a lot of them have resolve.
Yeah.
So let's see, we talked about seams, skills, defense, offense,
support in a variety of types,
healing. I think we covered it. And we answered questions that people had in the chat, like level 1 GM for their particular group's teamwork.
Alrighty.
So if you have any more questions ever about interesting teamwork questions or your group, come to the Discord at invite.gg/rkmark and ask us for group synergy optimization advice there, and we'll answer it out. Even if you were on YouTube and you didn't see the link, you still heard us say invite.gg/rkmark, so you can still do it. Other than that, let's say goodbye to YouTube.
Let's say goodbye to YouTube.
Bye, YouTube. See you next time.